Welcome to Supereconomics Book II, The How, a zoom in on Chapter 1, Š-ཊÉŠ, The Secret of a Booming Economy. Let us call it Supereconomics for Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Bill and Melinda Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Paul Romer, Stephanie Kelton, and Joseph Stiglitz, by myself, Nick Ray Ball. It's actually the 16th of November, 2020. I'll be doing a shorter version. This is the complete version of Chapter 1. Chapter 1, Š-ཊÉŠ, Financial Engineering, the Perfect Monopoly. Supereconomics defined. Supereconomics is any method, system, or theory that allows the Š-ཊÉŠ equation to flourish in the real world. This is the subject of Supereconomics Book II, Š-ཊÉŠ and the Suburb Sale. Index 1, Š-ཊÉŠ, financial engineering, let us call it supereconomics. Number 2, Š-ཊÉŠ, financial engineering, all on one page. So if you haven't got much time, just go straight to there. Number 3, S-World UCS History 3 and the Š-ཊÉŠ calculator, the secret of a booming monopoly, taking Malawi from 0 to 1% of GDP between 2024 and 2080. Includes 4 key principles and the bathtub flow diagrams. Part 4, discounting Š-ཊÉŠ 2024 to 2028 to today's value, generating $23.32 trillion in discounted cash flow, equal to about $1.66 trillion in GDP. Part 5, 100 countries. The suburb sale aside, because the Malawi model does not currently include trade, there is no zero-sum game, and it can be adapted and copied to 100 other countries, states or provinces. Part 6, if we apply the Malawi figures to 100 countries, we get a global discounted GDP figure of $1,166 trillion. Spreadsheets. We have started the task of turning this presentation into cloud-based software. See the following link, but it's a few months away from superseding the spreadsheet. The following presentation is best consumed alongside the spreadsheet. This is quite a packed spreadsheet dating back several years. If it will ask you to update, just say no. Okay, to download the spreadsheet, either of those URLs. There are many tabs, but it opens and begins as follows. Tab 1, Bathtub Graphics and DB. Here it is. And this is basically giving us an overview of exactly what we're talking about in this chapter and in this video. All this will make sense as we continue forward. The thing to notice is there's a lot more rows towards the end. That's because there's a lot more spin. We'll get to that soon. Okay. Tab 2, S World History 3B. Okay. So let's go to tab 2. Now this is where all the calculations happen. This is what we call the rest calculator. And we'll see this is at first there's a lot of empty spaces here, but as we go through, it starts to increase the amount of what we call spin. On each one of these, you'll have the year. This is 2052, and towards the end, we get the year's cash flow, year's GDP. Right at the very end, that's a lot of money. Okay, the next one's going to be jobs and education free. Let's just see what I've written. Hold on. Okay, this should be here. Right. So, this, where are we? Yeah, a condensed version of History 3 used for videos 43A2 about the spreadsheet, and 43A3 S-ཌ financial engineering. Okay, this then is basically this spreadsheet, but loads of cells have been hidden. So it shows that journey in bite-sized pieces. Okay, next one, this is one I mistakenly started earlier. That actually should be 5. Sorry about this. Part of the idea of doing the video is to correct these things. Right, so where are we? 3D is number 3. Cash flow and GDP should be number 4. Right, okay. So we've looked at these previous sheets. Now what we do is every one of these is the end result of each one of each sheet, and we go from 2024 down to 2042, 2043 to 2061, 2062, 2080. Then we add it all up, all for a lot of money. Then we discount it, which we'll be looking at like just soon. We're going to be looking at that very soon. Okay, so now it's tab 5, jobs and education free. In this tab we look at the number of companies in the network, how much each earns, how much labor is paid, how many personnel there are, how many paid to learn places, and how much each paid to learn place is. Okay, so this is the spreadsheet. Quite often see this with these cells hidden, and these and these. But here we got the cash flow, which is taken, straight from here, which in return was taken straight from here. Then we got the amount of companies. This is entered manually. It tells us how much cash flow each company will have each year. How much? 25% of that goes to labor. It tells us how much labor are going to earn collectively. 32 companies approximately. Sorry, 32 people per company approximately. Lets us know how many personnel there's going to be and how much they're going to make. And this is wrong, these two. It's supposed to be telling us the discounted value, but I think I made an error here, so don't worry about these figures right now. What we do then is 25% of labor's income goes to the pay-to-learn system, and that's in essence teaching people who are going to become part of the network or go on to have other good careers. Right, this is how many. So in 2024 there's 262,000 paid-to-learn trainees. In 2080, these figures are correct, it's the discount that's not correct. 15 million, 0.7 actually. And how much they earn, between 1,356 at the beginning and more later. Note that average earnings in Malawi is 250 a year, so we're 5 times higher than that for the trainee income. And it's just basically income given to people to play football and stuff, learn, use the virtual systems that we're gonna create and become masters of industry. Right. So I'm just gonna have a sip of Pepsi. Right. Okay. Back to. I'm just gonna point out that there is actually another couple of spreadsheets here. This, we're going to soon have a quick one-page summary where it says if we go to 99E and 100 spin, then $1 billion will end up as $62 billion of cash flow. And later in the books it tells you spin's cash flow is the same as normal cash flow. The last one is here, res v4 man. When we go all the way through and get to the videos, the very last video goes back and loops from history 3, which we've been looking at, the course of history 2. This history here which, as you can see, is another very long one, and it battles. Let's have a quick look at some recessions. Here's a recession coming. Here's a recession. When we see on the red, it's recessions. And the thing is, even though there's 15 years of recessions, it increases cash flow every single year. And this is this brings us Malawi. This history too brings Malawi to 1% of GDP by 2051, whereas history 3 is 2080. The reason for this is history 3 is the cautious history, because I basically took out trade. I didn't take it out completely. I gave it just a small 1 million figure. Okie dokie. As of, yep, that's just telling you we don't have this video that I'm making right now. Okay, so we're going to start getting into it. Chapter 1.1, Š-ཌÉŠ Financial Engineering. Let us call it Supereconomics. In this chapter, we tell the Š-ཌÉŠ and financial engineering story, which ends up with a network of 100 grand spin networks spending $1.166 trillion between 2024 and 2080, which is very powerful economics, and not least because most of this growth occurs in poor countries like Malawi, on which this prototype is created. And as a part of this process, grand spin networks, which are cities, industry, business, and prosperity, are created in less than net zero. So it's a gain to the planet. And in the case of Malawi, its dynamic comparative advantage is in creating net zero industry and goods to assist Africa in its net zero ambitions, which right now are very limited. With net zero in mind, Supereconomics Book III, 64 Reasons Why, presents the elephant in the room. Will the poorest 100 countries burn more and more carbon as they catch up with the West? The market says yes, unless something can be done about it. So the Malawi network seeks to make net zero options for the African market that are less expensive than fossil fuel methods. This is Malawi's dynamic comparative advantage, and it's important to note its primary and biggest market by far is Malawi itself. The S-World network in Malawi needs not sell a single item outside of Malawi for it to be successful, and that is very, very, very important. In addition to the net zero or less than net zero ambitions, the plan is super because we see the monopoly rents accrued are ingeniously spent in such a way that about 75% of all that money affords one or another special project, and that is actually equally as powerful. See Book 3. There are 64, actually now 73 special projects so far in ecology, philanthropy, education, science, and other areas. Hence the name of Supereconomics Book 3, 64 Reasons Why. Each special project is a reason why this is a good thing. Lastly, for every poor person who dreams of escaping to the West or other rich countries, S-World Grand Spin networks have all that one should want, and will be creating jobs, housing, education, et al. For billions of people, and will put a stop to economic immigration. Indeed, we may even reverse it, as Westerners wish to work and live in the new grand spin network economies. We've got a few graphics here. Polar bear emphasizing that S-World Supereconomics is the cure for climate change in the third world. We've got a dynamic comparative advantage graphic, and we have a beautiful girl. Š-ཌÉŠ Financial Engineering, how we can do the most good. Okay, chapter 1.2. Now, if you're in a hurry, this is just where you go. First page, one page, this is it, it's done. Okay, here we go. Š-ཌÉŠ Supereconomics in one page, the monopoly equation, starting with, say, $1 billion in a network of business. A network of business spends that $1 billion with 90% of recipients being other businesses in the same network. Now, halfway through the year, the network has 900 million in new cash flow created by the spin, which it spends again also with 90% of recipients being other businesses in the same network, after which the network companies retain 810 million, and by the end of the year has spent the first 900 plus the 810, which equals 1.710 million. So that's 1.7 trillion. We call this respending of the cash flow. No, it's not. It's 1.71 billion. We call this respending of the cash flow spin, and we're at spin 2. Spin again to spin 3 means we need to spend all the money 3 times a year. So 900 million plus 810 million plus 729 billion equals 2.439 billion. Just going to write that in there. Billion in cash flow. And okay, where were we? Plus 800 plus 729 plus equals 2.439 billion in cash flow, and spin 4 adds 656 million, which equals 3.3 billion basically. Hypothetically, with careful planning, it is theoretically possible to increase E to 99 and spin to 100. See tab 6, not that complicated, spin 100. This time starting in year 1 with 1 billion. One can generate 62.76 billion in cash flow using these settings. And I showed you this just a while ago. Here we go. Oops, not that page. Here we go. Yeah, so set it to 99%. Returns to other companies in the same network. Spin that 100 times, and you created 62 billion in cash flow. Yeah. Okay. To facilitate, we need 4 actions. Businesses mostly buy from other businesses in the network. This is marshaled by the TBS, Total Business Systems, controlling the pricing, supply and demand of all business transactions. 2. Companies must make goods and provide services on time, well before time production, facilitated by the 10 technologies. Labour are mostly paid in network credits, so most of labour spending is with one network vendor or another. The government are to be paid in output. In place of standard tax, we propose tax symmetry. In the beginning, the government choose which industries and so what products and services will be created. For example, social housing, infrastructure, solar arrays, administrators, hospitals, doctors and nurses, schools, teachers, universities, et al. The most sophisticated scenario we have so far is called S-World UCS History 3, which from 2024 to 2080 moves the world's poorest country, Malawi, from 0 to 1% of GDP, creating about 23.23 trillion in cash flow, which generates about 11.66 trillion in GDP. Consider this system used in 10 countries and we get to the figure 1.166 trillion US dollars. Okay, chapter 1.3. The S-ཌ calculator 2024. Below we see an income statement which adds up investment savings and the suburb sale, aid, foundations, real estate sold and exports. This gives us the figure in red that goes at the beginning of what we call the Š-ཌ calculator. Just go into the spreadsheets. This is the Š-ཌ calculator. Same thing here. Okay. The S-ཌ, let's just scroll down a little bit. The S-ཌ calculator 2024 below, in red, we see revenue and savings in 2024, of which 90% of cash flow is spent with other companies in the same network and remains in the network as savings the following year. We've also got some little stats here. But at the top, money that we have times by 90%. That means 90% is going to other companies in the same business, network. Means this is how much we have after that spending, which we can spend the following year. In the previous spreadsheet, in yellow text, we see, let's go there. Yeah, here we go, the yellow text. In the previous spreadsheet, in yellow text, we see year's cash flow. This counts how much cash flow is spent business to business within the network in 2024. Network to company cash flow, 5.69 billion. 2,048 companies. Cash flow per company, 2.77 million. That's unspun. Personnel, 65,536. Paid to learn trainees, 262,144. Social housing villas built, 1,185. Key principle 1. E. Recycle efficiency sees 90% of 2024 cash flow spent with other companies or personnel in the same network. Of the 6.31 billion, 10% being 632 million is lost as e-leakage, and 90% remains in the network bank spread among 2,048 different companies. Key principle 2, the Siena equilibrium, also known as the theory of every business or super Pareto efficiency. The Siena equilibrium plots the savings and revenue spending of all companies and their personnel so that at the end of a spin the money has changed hands in such a way so that it is evenly spread throughout the 2,048 companies and their personnel. This can then be repeated to occur more than once when we introduce spin in 2025. Key principle 3, where we see the balance of cash flow, 5.69 billion, transferred into savings and then revenue in the following year, 2025. We see this on the next page in the bathroom system graphic as savings plus revenue, 6.32 billion, but then all the money goes down the drain, losing 632 million to leakage, but 90% being 5.68 billion is saved and recycled. This is spin 1, and so long as there is more income from the suburb sale than is lost to e-leakage, written the house symbol, greater than symbol, E-L, E for efficiency, L for leakage, then the system is in profit. This profit at the end of 2024 becomes savings, which turns into cash flow in 2025, shared by the now. Let's just write that in there. The now 496 different companies, double the amount of companies from 2024. And we've got a graphic here, 2 women in control. Okay, here's the graphic that I spoke about just now. So at the top we've got savings from 2023 and revenue. Gives us our starting figure, 6.32 billion. That's how much cash flow is in the bank. Okay, then 90% drains down and 632 million is lost to leakage. That's gone to other companies anywhere in the world. And actually half of that's gone to personnel. Then what we do is we recycle the rest of it. 90% is now recycled because it's gone from one company to another in the same network, and the Siena equilibrium sort of messed it all around so that everyone ends up pretty much even. It's not that hard to do if you've got a lot of companies. Okay, let's carry on. So now we're in 2025. I'm going to have another sip of Pepsi. Right. Okay, so Š-ŁÉÉŠ Malawi Grand Spin Network, that GSN stands for Grand Spin Network, history 3. Network company to network company cash flow 14.89 billion. Companies 4,096, double from the year before. Cash flow per company has now gone up to 3.64 million. Personnel 131,000. Paid to learn trainees just under 500,000. Social housing villas built 6,238. We've got some figures here. Investment 0, only investment in the first year, unless you call the suburb sale investment. So the suburb sale aside, investment is 0. Savings from the last year 5.6. The suburb sale itself just over 1 billion. Aid and foundations 1.5 billion. Real estate sold 275 million. This 275 accounts for about 10% of, actually it's about more like 8% of all the income. The rest of the income, 92%, comes from the suburb sale, which will have been agreed many years before we even start. So we don't start unless the suburb sale is contracted. Once it is contracted, we start. So you can't argue with this. And you see the trade there, tiny amount, and that was because in history 2, I could see a lot of people saying, where are you getting these trade figures from? So basically took trade out. So now it's the suburb sale must equal more than e-leakage, and we'll see the equation for that some point later, I'm sure. Okay, so the Š-ŁÉÉŠ calculator 2025, we're now slightly familiar. Below in red we see 2025 revenue and savings from 2024 is now 8.57 billion. Note the spend by has decreased to the 11th of July, see that here, and a new row has been added but has appeared below it. And this is here, whole new row. This new row is the 91% of cash flow that was recycled from the initial spending. It starts on the 11th of July 2025 and ends at the end of the year. Should be the 31st of December, not the 1st of January, but yeah. So this time we've got the initial cash flow spent in the first half of the year, and we've got 90% or 91% of that spent in the second half of the year. Everyone's just doing things faster, and note the more times you increase spin by 1, it's not doubling anymore, it's thirding for the next time, and eventually an extra spin, you know, when you're talking about 30 spin, doesn't make that much of a difference. Makes a lot of difference to the money, doesn't make that much difference to the logistics of creating what needs to be created on time. Okay, key principle 4. What's this little? Okay, spin. In 2025, spin is 2. This means we spend the savings and revenue minus e-leakage 2 times by speeding up operations to initially conclude by the 11th of July 2025. But then, because E is 91, by the 12th of July 2025, 91% of revenue and savings remains in the central bank. And so we can respend that 91%, 7.8 billion, in between the 12th of July and the end of the year. This time, when we calculate the year's cash flow, we count the cash flow from both spin 1 7.8 billion, and spin 2, 7.1 billion, equals 14.9. Note the amount of companies doubled from 2048 to 4096, which diluted the cash flow per company, but still shows a 35% net increase in average cash flow per company, which rises from 2.77 million in 2024 to 3.64 million in 2025. Further, note that we can increase cash flow per company just by making less new companies. Fewer new companies. Š-ÞÉÉŠ bathroom graphic 2 2025. Below we see the magic as we increase from spin 1 to spin 2. Here we see spin 1 is this first section. Jan, Feb, March, April, May, June, July has 8.57. This is loss to leakage. 0.77 billion lost to leakage, but 90% of it, or 91% of it, comes round and is added to the bath. So we've now got all of this cash flow, first half of the year, second half of the year, roughly. And this 7.1 is conserved for savings for next year. And that's the trick. So long as E is high enough, the more spins, the more times we can spend the same cash flow in the same year. Okay, bathroom graphic 3, 2026. This year we move to spin 3 and the cash flow is divided into 3 time zones. 1st of Jan to the 12th of May, 2026. 13th of May to the 11th of September, 2026. 12th of September to the 31st of December, 2026. Below we can start to see the system growing exponentially as we now add cash flows in spin 1, 2 and 3 for 26.95 billion in cash flows spent by the network of businesses that year. And yeah, it's obvious now. Jan, Feb, March, April, May, this amount of money, little bit's lost, most of it goes back into the network and it's all spent again, June, July, August, September, and does it again. Okay. Below we see this on the spreadsheet. In 2026 we start with revenue and savings in red at 10.549 billion. E is 92% and 92% of 10.549 billion is 9.7 billion made before 12th of May 2026. Then 9.7 billion times 92% equals 8.92 billion made between 12th of May and 11th of September. And in the spin 3 we see that 8.92 billion times 92% equals 8.21 billion made between the 11th of September to the end of the year. Huh. And there we see it. Spin 1, spin 2, spin 3 makes this amount of cash flow, which is approximately this in GDP. This is how much is saved for savings in the next year. 6,044 companies now. Each has a cash flow of that looks a bit high. I'll look at that later. Let's get down to here, the income sheet. Okay, revenue and savings. Just a note here, we're at 0.01% of GDP at the moment. Again, investment 0. Savings is now 7 billion. Suburb sale, much the same as before, just over 1 billion. Aid and foundations up to 2 billion. Real estate sold, not much more than before, 289. And remember, we can just get rid of that figure completely and just take 10% off the total. That's, what I often do, because people can argue, are you going to sell the real estate? It's like, well, actually, let's just remove the real estate. Okay, from the calculations, that is. Okay, so the Š-ÞÉÉŠ calculator 2026 network company to network company cash flow 26.85 billion, companies 6,144, cash flow per company 4.37 million, personnel 169,000, Paid to learn trainees, 688,000. Social housing villas built 13,588. I think we're going to have a look at some pictures here. SOS engineering, how we do the most good, tax symmetry, S-World DCA soft, and S-World Angel Wing. Combinatorial explosion, high complexity science, the Supereconomics AI. Book 1, 10 technologies. SOS calculator 2032. In 2032, we have moved 8 years forwards, each year adding a spin. We are now at spin 9 and an E of 99%. Note that on reflection, I would not use an E above 97.5 at this point. And it's from Res Bathroom Graphics tab on the spreadsheet. Res Bathroom Graphics tab on the spreadsheet. Okay, so now we can clearly see the different spins. We see spins every 42 days now, and you can see the dates at which time each spin ends. So let's carry on with the text. A quick experiment with year's cash flow of 106 billion. If we were to change E to 97.5, we would change year's cash flow to 98.57 billion. And at 95%, that's changing E to 95%. We see the year's cash flow to 87.14 billion. Which is still very respectable considering we started with just 6.32 billion in 2042, and the network bank now holds 11.33 billion in cash as savings. Network company cash flow 106 billion, companies 24,576, cash flow per company 4.32 million, personnel 786,432 people. Malawi 2080, Supereconomics free, E of 99.5%, and spin of 32. By 2080, we see revenue and savings is at 278.2 billion, which is spun 32 times, and each spin lasts between 11 and 12 days. And here we see it. It's easy to follow now. Ending up with making 8 trillion a year, but that's not discounted. Network company to network company 8.21 trillion, companies 376,680, cash flow per company 25.1 million, personnel 10,485,760, social housing villas built 10,134,947. And we just see here in green, Malawi has now finally got to over 1% of global GDP. Investment 0 again, investments only in the first year. Savings 225 billion, yeah. Suburb sale is now bringing in, there's now 3 different suburb sales going on, 3 different cities going on, to be quite frank. And this year that has brought in 48 billion. But again, that's not discounted. Real estate sold, significant a lot, but as before, we can just remove the real estate if we want and to take the final figures down from wherever they are to 10% less than wherever they are. Right, so we have now got 327,680 companies spending on average 25 million a year, taking Malawi from 0 to 1% of GDP, a 29x increase in the money supply, making a grand total of 8.2 trillion in cash flow by the year 2080, in the year 2080. But for this number to have any meaning, we need to discount it to today's value. Chapter 1.4, Discounting Š-ŁÉŚ 2024 to 2080 to today's value. So far there are 3 techniques for discounting, which I shall present after the 2024 to 2080 which we shall present after the 2024 to 2080 years cash flow display. For now, let's just look at 2080 discounting technique 3, adjust the growth variables. Just gonna have a drink. To begin, on the tab S-Bar History 3, go to row 8 and we see 4 different growth input fields. Okay, let's try and find that. History 3B. I'm going to go all the way to the top. I'm going to go left. And we're going to go here. Global growth 102.5%. That's there about, you know, most people put it about there. We're saying Malawi growth is going to be 105%, and Malawi growth real estate is going to be 105%. And just while we're here, Malawi growth city development 105. In general, most people say global growth is about 102, but developing nations, because they're catching up, expected to be higher, 105%. And just while we're here, note this is where we capture the city expenses, income. Okay, let's go back to our guide. Okay, so global growth, as we saw, default is, why is that like that? Global growth default 102.5%, Malawi growth. Trade default 105, Malawi growth. Real estate default 105, Malawi growth. City development 105. The suburb sale generates 90% of all income. If we turn all these variables to 100%, be careful not to enter 0%, and look at 2080 Š-ČréŠ calculator results, we get a year's cash flow of 646.8 billion, which from other tests seems to be about the right figure. Right, okay, I'm going to try. So we're looking for this magical figure, 646. I hope I'm going to do this right. So we're just going to change these to 100. Oops, what the? No, I don't want help. I do want help, but not from Excel. Okay, now if we go to the very end, get to that last. Yeah, there we go. That changes that figure to 646, which was, if we remember, about 8 trillion. So 646 billion is in today's terms. 8 trillion is how much that money will be worth in 2080. How much? Yeah. Okay. we see the point. The figure's correct there. Okay, so from other tests, this seems to be right. Just while we're here, government spending, tax symmetry, 75%. Government basically help us assign what we're going to be doing, and 75% of that is going to be doing things the government would like to have done. 25% for Labour. 2,949% increase to the money supply. Okay, now, where are we? Now we need to take account of the possible GDP double counting error presented in the first chapter of Harvard's David A. Moss's book, A Concise Guide. Oops. A Concise Guide to Macroeconomics. We deal with this possible intricacy of the process by adding the CFV, cash flow variable, which we can see above is set at 50%. Let's just try and find that. There it is, cash flow variable, 50%. We get this figure from tab, the Siena equilibrium 1.06, cell AI211. which gives us a cash flow variable of 66.163%, and tab Siena equilibrium 107, cell A1211, which gives a CFV of 47.7 for an average CFV cash flow variable of 56.9%. But there should be many more Siena equilibriums, so it makes sense to add some leeway, and 50% was a convenient number. We may not need to apply the CFV. Currently we do, but if we did not, we would double the GDP figures, and the amount of villas would increase from just over 10 million to just over 20 million. Note the definition, what's the difference between a villa and a house? A swimming pool. How we're going to get the water for 20 million swimming pools is another chapter entirely. Okay, yeah, go cash flow variable. Woo! Go no cash flow variable. Yeah, that's what I mean to say. Go no cash flow variable. Okay, but for now it stays C tab, H3, cash flow, and GDP. Let me see. There we are. Ah, yeah, okay. Where's the cash flow variable? Here. There we go. Right. But first we see that 8.2 trillion in 2080 is worth 6.48 billion in today's money. Here and here. Here's with the 5% growth. Here's without the 5% growth. Note this is not shown on the spreadsheet. You need to physically as I've just done, you need to change those variables at the top to get that figure of 646. Okay, next we increase the number of countries, states and provinces from 1 Malawi to 100, mostly but maybe not exclusively economically challenged countries, for a combined total of 32.3 billion of GDP made and sold in 2080, discounted to today's money. Apply to 100 states, countries. Lastly, we compare the discounted value of the 100-strong network of GDP to the World Bank figure for 2018 global GDP to see that in 2080 the 100-strong grand spin networks would generate 38% of GDP if it were today. Note, however, that this is misleading, as S-World is not competing for global GDP. It is adding more abundance of GDP on top of the current figures. Note that this initial GDP will be made net zero and will assist with the rest of the world with their is net zero and will assist the rest of the world with their net zero ambitions, plus of course the other 72 special projects in ecology, philanthropy and science presented in book 3, 64 Reasons Why. See www.angeltheory.org/64-reasons-why. One moment and I'm back. Now let us look at the year's cash flow for all the years from 2024 to 2080. Cash flow and GDP from 2024 to 2080. Let's just scroll down a little bit. Now we see more of the spreadsheet tab, H3, total cash flow and GDP. What we see below, the value of cash flow each year from 2024 to 2080, copied from the S-World History 3B tab. Okay, let's just show you that. We're on this page, I believe. Yeah. Let me see each of these goes to this page, History 3B, i.e. this figure here. A note, easy way to make a mistake is not to put these back to where they were. 102 point 102 102.5. No, idiot. 105. 102.5. 105. 105. Yeah, if you don't put those back, you'll suddenly, the figures will be like, well, that makes no sense. Okay. Once those figures, values are put in, you go down, and each year I've taken this figure, cash flow. So we can see there, 5.6, that'll be the first figure. Second figure, 14.8. Oh, is the next year. You go down. Sorry about all this scruffy stuff. It's just rough workings. There's that 14.8 figure. The next figure, 26.8. Oops. There we see it again. And it will go up to that figure there. 8 billion. But remember from before, that's that's a lower figure. I can't find it right now. We'll have to come back to that. Where was I? Okay. What we see below is the value of cash flow from each year from 2024 to 2080, copied from the S-World History Free tab. Okay, so let's just refresh that. Here, each year is captured from History Free B in the year's cash flow, one per year. Above we see a grand Š-věÉŠ. We see a grand Š-věÉŠ history. Above we see a grand Š-věÉŠ history free total of 140.4 trillion. But as before, this number, for this number to have any meaning, we need to discount it to today's value. Using the same method as before, the growth variable method, we turn the 4 growth variables to 100%. To 0 growth, we get 23.32 trillion. .6 of the 16.6% of the 140.4 US dollars cash flow total. By multiplying any figure by 16.66 will give the discounted value of that figure in 2080. Each year it changes. Before we work out the cash flow variable and the 100 club, there are 2 double checks, different ways of working out the same thing. First, and the original discounting method, is to calculate the value of the 10.118720 social villas built. The workings are on tab History Free B and are found a long way over to the right in the columns EJ to EN. Let's just show you that. It's way over here. EJ. Should start to see that. Here we go. EJ, EN. Starts at 150, but increases each year. See 153. And we've got some tallies here. Okay. Found a long way to the right in the columns at EJ. Beginning with a cash flow of 150,000, increasing to just below 600,000 due to growth. So to calculate discounted cash flow and after GDP, we can simply multiply the number of houses by the initial growth figure of 150,000 for a total of 1.52 trillion. The cost of all homes method. Cash flow, cost of home 150,000, amount of homes just over 10 million, cost of all homes 1.5 trillion. Possibly, yeah, I think so, yeah. Expand to all spending, because this is only 6.25%. That's how much of the total cash flow, 6.25% is, well, actually 25% is allocated to labor, and of that 25%, a quarter is allocated to housing. So that makes 6.25%. Once we have this number, we multiply it by 16, because Special Project 20, net zero 5-star social housing, receives exactly 6.25% of cash flow. Therefore, if we multiply by 16, we shall get the discounted cash flow for discounted value for all cash flow, which equals 24.28 trillion, which is close to the 24.32 trillion we got from the previous method. It's scrappy, and it could turn out that that's 600,000 by 20. Sorry, it could turn out. Well, look, it could turn out to be wrong, but it's probably right because it comes to pretty much the same figure. Lastly comes the World Bank 2018 method from tab 3, SWOT History 3b. This method considers the 0 to 1% of GDP quality and measures that independently. First, we get the value of global GDP in 2018 for the World Bank is 85.8 trillion. We then estimate that on average a network that starts with 0% of GDP and smoothly rises to 1% will have a value similar to half this figure. Thus, we multiply the okay, that's actually not completely right. But it comes back here. 1 second. The math's good. I've just written it wrong. Thus, we multiply the 85.8 trillion by half of 1% times 0.5%, giving us 439 billion that year. Lastly, we multiply that figure by the 56 years from 2024 to 2080 for 24.3 trillion, which again gives a similar ballpark figure to the previous two techniques. The point is, three ways to do it, pretty close, or very close, actually. Chances are that's a good ballpark. Right. However, there is a problem. The figures from techniques 1 and 2 are set to decrease by 50% by our friend the cash flow variable, the David A. Moss cash flow variable, whereas the World Bank does not apply whereas this does not apply to the World Bank technique. Maybe CFV is just a fantasy. I hope so. For this problem, let me introduce a quote from Paul Romer, 2018 Nobel Prize winner, and first on the sheet of who I want to get this to. What cities need right now is big plans, and big plans must be simple. Plans like the 1811 expansion of New York City, which was for a 7-fold expansion. You can't have a big plan and also micromanaging. That's also micromanaging a lot of details. It can't be complicated. So they have to have big plans, and they have to be simple, and you have to rely on other people to fill in a lot of the detail. In all honesty, this plan is actually quite big, but that's, you know, it's a unique case that someone would spend 11 years working 90 hours a week on one thing. That's, yeah, better to have plans. Anyway, this is the micromanaging is all in the software. Without the software, this is all software. This has all been built as software systems. Micromanaging can happen a lot because of the software. That said, you've got to rely on people to fill in a lot of the detail. That is completely true. So we shall pass the baton of the CFV problem to Paul Romer and people, the Marin Institute, to fill in the detail. But it's not a reason to be too concerned if we don't have to include, too concerned, comma. If we don't have to include the CFV, our GDP figures will double, as will all special project allocations, including Special Project 20, which jumps from the 10 to 20 million social housing built in Malawi by 2080. Note in general, if a potential error leads to making more money, I sometimes leave it. Only when the coin flip is potentially limiting do I crack down on it. Of course, zero error is preferred. Okay, nearly at the end now. Chapter 1.5, the 100 Club, 2024 to 2080. 100 countries, states, provinces and countries. I don't know why this is like this. Finally, finally, above we see the value of the network GDP, of network GDP. Finally, above we see the value of the network GDP for 100 countries, which we call the 100 Club, has already have some strong candidates. Below, we are allowed to multiply. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry about this. We are allowed to multiply by 100 for 100 countries, following the Š-věÉŠ Malawi prototype, because there is only token trade in history free, with almost all gains accruing in the inner Malawi Grand Spin network and the businesses it supports. Because there is no competition for trade, it's a non-zero sum game. If each country, state, province can attract free suburb sale buyers, they will also have a result per the above spreadsheet. 300 suburb sales may sound like a lot at the price of 1 billion a year plus 5% annual growth, but given the returns as seen above, it's conceivable that we will reach this target, given the number of companies, countries, banks, sovereign wealth funds, university endowments, individual billionaires, foundations, non-governmental organizations, and other that can afford this investment. Significantly exceeds 300. So it is theoretically a real possibility, a possibility that will be simulated and mapped out in SWORD-UCS as soon as the SWORD-UCS software is completed. This task is now underway and will be attached to this paper/book summary soon. Chapter 16. And at last, here we are, the how, behind the mythical figure of $1.166 trillion US, discounted to today's value. The table below shows us where we got this seemingly mythical figure of $1.166 trillion that we saw at the beginning of the Supereconomics II book. And we have been through this spreadsheet. Here we have the okay, that's my engineer Kieran has just arrived, ready to start the continue the the software that is doing exactly this. Okay, let me just finish up. we see the... Okay, I'm going to have to... We see the 1.66 trillion figure above in the last row but one discounted, and the potential double counting problem addressed by the 50% CFV. Videos. By now one must be thinking there's got to be something wrong here. It's just too big and economic. Free lunch? Welcome to my world. I've been looking for the mistake for nearly 3 years now. This journey is now Supereconomics Book II, Š-ཊÉŠ, and the suburb sale. On this journey, I have made several videos. Š-ཊÉŠ History 3 videos. The following 2 videos are the most recent, but are not for the presentation just seen. Rather, they are for previous. Here we have a bunch of videos that you can follow. This one is of particular interest. It's History 2 that I mentioned earlier. This video tells the story of UCS History 2, the precursor to the History 3 that includes trade and makes from 0 to 1% of GDP 29 years earlier in 2051. This powerful history also battles 15 years of simulated recessions to extreme depressions. Where at one point all trade completely stops for a year, but just by adjusting ENS, the Malawi Grand Spin Network increases its cash flow every year. Thank you for your time. Please be in touch. Cheers. Nick Ray Ball, founding CEO and systems designer. And a note that we've been reading chapter 1, part 1, and part 2 continues. It is the addendums for what we've just heard. Okay, thank you for listening, and please be in touch.